Time is nature's way of keeping everything from happening at once. A wife lasts only for the length of the marriage, but an ex-wife is there for the rest of your life. Sex without love is a meaningless experience, but as far as meaningless experiences go, it's pretty damn good. It is impossible to experience one's death objectively and still carry a tune. In my house I'm the boss, my wife is just the decision maker. The food here is terrible, and the portions are too small. Why are our days numbered and not, say, lettered? I was nauseous and tingly all over. I was either in love or I had smallpox. Harvard makes mistakes too, you know. Kissinger taught there. I had a terrible education. I attended a school for emotionally disturbed teachers. Organized crime in America takes in over $40 billion a year and spends very little on office supplies. I failed to make the chess team because of my height. I believe there is something out there watching us. Unfortunately, it's the government. Bisexuality immediately doubles your chances for a date on Saturday night. Right now it's only a notion, but I think I can get the money to make it into a concept, and later turn it into an idea. I'm not afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens. It seemed the world was divided into good and bad people. The good ones slept better while the bad ones seemed to enjoy the waking hours much more. There are worse things in life than death. Have you ever spent an evening with an insurance salesman? If you're not failing every now and again, it's a sign you're not doing anything very innovative. The lion and the calf shall lie down together, but the calf won't get much sleep. He was so depressed, he tried to commit suicide by inhaling next to an Armenian. I don't believe in the afterlife, although I am bringing a change of underwear. Life is divided into the horrible and the miserable. I've never been an intellectual, but I have this look. The talent for being happy is appreciating and liking what you have, instead of what you don't have. I am thankful for laughter, except when milk comes out of my nose. What if nothing exists and we're all in somebody's dream? Money is better than poverty, if only for financial reasons. Not only is there no God, but try finding a plumber on Sunday. I will not eat oysters. I want my food dead. Not sick. Not wounded. Dead. If my films make one more person miserable, I'll feel I have done my job. What if everything is an illusion and nothing exists? In that case, I definitely overpaid for my carpet. I think being funny is not anyone's first choice. I took a speed reading course and read War and Peace in 20 minutes. It involves Russia. Eternal nothingness is fine if you happen to be dressed for it. I'd call him a sadistic, hippophilic necrophile, but that would be beating a dead horse. I ran into Isosceles. He had a great idea for a new triangle. 70% of success in life is showing up. My luck is getting worse and worse. Last night, for instance, I was mugged by a Quaker. Man consists of two parts, his mind and his body, only the body has more fun. I'm very proud of my gold pocket watch. My grandfather, on his deathbed, sold me this watch. Basically my wife was immature. I'd be at home in the bath and she'd come in and sink my boats. If you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I want to achieve it through not dying. Students achieving oneness will move on to two-ness. My one regret in life is that I am not someone else. I am not afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens. If only God would give me some clear sign. Like making a large deposit in my name at a Swiss bank. Life is full of misery, loneliness, and suffering, and it's all over much too soon. Some guy hit my fender, and I told him, be fruitful and multiply, but not in those words. You can live to be 100 if you give up all the things that make you want to live to be 100. I don't think my parents liked me. They put a live teddy bear in my crib. I'm such a good lover because I practice a lot on my own. I'm astounded by people who want to know the universe when it's hard enough to find your way around Chinatown. In Beverly Hills, they don't throw their garbage away. They make it into television shows. To you I'm an atheist, to God, I'm the loyal opposition. His lack of education is more than compensated for by his keenly developed moral bankruptcy. I have bad reflexes. I was once run over by a car being pushed by two guys. I don't have to freedom kiss my wife when what I really want to do is French kiss her. When I was kidnapped, my parents snapped into action. They rented out my room. I tended to place my wife under a pedestal. Why does man kill? He kills for food. And not only food, frequently there must be a beverage. Dying is one of the few things that can be done as easily lying down. Comedy just pokes at problems, rarely confronts them squarely. Drama is like a plate of meat and potatoes, comedy is rather the dessert, a bit like meringue. On the plus side, death is one of the few things that can be done as easily lying down. Life doesn't imitate art, it imitates bad television. When we played softball, I'd steal second base, feel guilty and go back. If my films don't show a profit, I know I'm doing something right. As the poet said, only God can make a tree, probably because it's so hard to figure out how to get the bark on. It's not that I'm afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Most of the time I don't have much fun. The rest of the time I don't have any fun at all. In California, they don't throw their garbage away, they make it into TV shows. Who bothers to cook TV dinners? I suck them frozen. We stand today at a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness. The other leads to total extinction. Let us hope we have the wisdom to make the right choice. The only way to be happy is to love to suffer. There are two types of people in this world, good and bad. The good sleep better, but the bad seem to enjoy the waking hours much more. Some actors like the total freedom Woody gives them, but I like to have some parameters, some structure. One of the truly lucky things that happened to me in my life. More than any time in history mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness, the other to total extinction. Let us pray that we have the wisdom to choose correctly. My family members are here with me because they're afraid to stay at home. There is no excuse for it. This is just uncalled for. It goes beyond courtesy. It's protection of life. No one will be petty about this and we can forget about our differences, and I will not have to refer to my French fried potatoes as freedom fries, and I don't have to freedom kiss my wife when I really want to French kiss her. So let's pull together now. Now we're in the final stages. There's a lot of due diligence, work to be done in the next 120 days, but it feels good to get everybody on board. One of the fortuitous events, one of the great pieces of luck in my life. I am very attached to this watch. My grandfather sold it to me when he was dying. I feel that life is divided up into the horrible and the miserable. I don't respond well to mellow, you know what I mean. I have a tendency to, if I get too mellow, I ripen and then rot. I don't want to live in a city where the only cultural advantage is that you can make a right turn on a red light. If it turns out that there is a God, I don't think that he's evil. But the worst that you can say about him is that basically he's an underachiever. It is no secret that organized crime in America takes in over $40 billion a year. This is quite a profitable sum, especially when one considers that the mafia spends very little for office supplies. It is impossible to travel faster than the speed of light, and certainly not desirable, as one's hat keeps blowing off. Recently there has been a lot of controversy between the countries, and I would hope that now the two countries could put all that behind them and start to build on what really has been a great friendship. Organized crime in America takes in over $40 billion a year. This is quite a profitable sum, especially when one considers that the mafia spends very little for office supplies. Some guy hit my fender and I said be fruitful and multiply, but not in those words. I was thrown out of NYU my freshman year for cheating on my metaphysics final. You know, I looked within the soul of the boy sitting next to me. I was thrown out of NYU my freshman year, for cheating on my metaphysics final. You know, I looked within the soul of the boy sitting next to me. I think people should mate for life, like pigeons or Catholics. It is clear the future holds great opportunities. It also holds pitfalls. The trick will be to avoid the pitfalls, seize the opportunities, and get back home by 6 o'clock. To love is to suffer. To avoid suffering, one must not love. But then, one suffers from not loving. Therefore, to love is to suffer, not to love is to suffer is to suffer. To be happy is to love. To be happy, then, is to suffer, but suffering makes one unhappy. Therefore, to be happy, one must love or love to suffer or suffer from too much happiness. Where am I, anyhow? I mean, what happened to everybody? We like food. This is too much to eat at one time. You'd get sick. Every time I've made a movie over the years, there was a lot of confusion between who I am and who the character in the movie is. In this picture, there was no way anybody could make that association. The lead character, played by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, is this gorgeous, troubled, highly sensitive character. There was no way anyone could confuse me with anyone in the picture. The good people sleep much better at night than the bad people. Of course, the bad people enjoy the waking hours much more. Every time I hear Wagner I feel like invading Poland. As the poet said, only God can make a tree, probably because it's so hard to figure out how to get the bark on. Is knowledge knowable? If not, how do we know this? I've often said, the only thing standing between me and greatness is me. Probably in retrospect I should have bowed out of that relationship with Pharaoh much earlier than I did. A fast word about oral contraception. I asked a girl to go to bed with me, she said no. A relationship, I think, is like a shark, you know. It has to constantly move forward or it dies. And I think what we got on our hands is a dead shark. That of a musician, but a musician playing in small jazz clubs or alone. I do not give concerts. I come on stage and play with my friends in the band, all of whom are better musicians than me. The curse of the jade scorpion. A lion and a lamb can lay together, but the lamb will get little sleep. All people know the same truth, our lives consist of how we choose to distort them. It shows exactly what you can do if you're a total psychotic. It's something that occurs to me many times in my movies. They can often be treated comically or dramatically, and I usually opt to treat them comically. But it occurred to me that you could get a story and you could fool around with it both ways. I've gained no insight, no mellowing. I would make the same mistakes again. I'm going to give my psychoanalyst one more year, then I'm going to Lourdes. I let the cast improvise a lot, especially with the slang, where they would say G&T for gin and tonic. I wouldn't say that. I would say dicey when they would say dodgy. I learned a lot. I like the film, and that's rare for me to say because I make films and I am almost invariably disappointed. When I saw Match Point, I said, my God, it came out. It surprised me. So I am enjoying the experience because it happens so rarely for me. If my film makes one more person miserable, I've done my job. I'm a timid person. I was beaten up by Quakers. If there is reincarnation, I'd like to come back as Pamela Anderson's fingertips. If you'd like to know how to get from the Big Apple to the Big Easy, take Highway Love, and you'll get there. Interestingly, according to modern astronomers, space is finite. This is a very comforting thought, particularly for people who can never remember where they have left things. Cloquet hated reality but realized it was still the only place to get a good steak. I can't vouch for this film, in all honesty. I do not believe in an afterlife, although I am bringing a change of underwear. The higher the school rating, the better off we are in having prospective projects look at our area. And my parents finally realize that I'm kidnapped and they snap into action immediately. They rent out my room. The last time I was inside a woman was when I was inside the Statue of Liberty. The lion and the calf will lay down together, but the calf won't get much sleep. I don't mind dying, as long as I don't have to be there when it happens. Gauguin flew into a frenzy. He held my head under the X-ray machine for 10 straight minutes and for several hours after I could not blink my eyes in unison. If the Impressionists had been dentists. This year I'm a star, but what will I be next year? A black hole. Raised by two mothers, wow. Most of us barely survive one. You use sex to express every emotion except love. I hate the beach. I hate the sun. I'm pale and I'm red-headed. I don't tan, I stroke. The roe is reputed to sleep for 1,000 years and then suddenly rise in flames, particularly if it was smoking when it dozed off. Life is short. Short, and not about anything except what you can touch and what touches you. In order to be successful, all you've got to do is show up 80% of the time. I have no regard for that kind of ceremony. I just don't think they know what they're doing. When you see who wins those things or who doesn't win them, you can see how meaningless this Oscar thing is. When you make the film, there's a big difference between when you're in your own home at the typewriter, and when you're standing on a mountain, or on a street corner, and buses are coming by. It's a different reality. You make a million changes that were never in the script, but that reality dictates. If I can play a scene in a master shot, I always prefer it. And the actors always prefer it. It's fun to look at on the screen. The actors get a chance to sink their teeth into something substantial, and it's economically helpful. That's one of the nice things about writing, or any art. If the thing's real, it just lives. I've always liked, someday the lamb will lay by the lion. But it won't get much sleep. Curiosity, that's what kills us. Not mothers or all that bullshit about the ozone layer. It's our own hearts and minds. When a film is reviled, you open a film and people say, oh, it's the stupidest thing, it's the worst movie. You think, oh, nobody's going to ever speak to you again. But, it doesn't happen. Nobody cares. You know, they read it and they say, oh, they hated your film. You care, at the time. But they don't. Nobody else cares. I can levitate birds. No one cares. I was walking through the woods, thinking about Christ. If he was a carpenter, I wondered what he charged for bookshelves. Side effects: not only is there no God, but try getting a plumber on the weekend. Woody Allen: sex alleviates tension. Love causes it. I think Bergman's films have eternal relevance, because they deal with the difficulty of personal relationships and lack of communication between people and religious aspirations and mortality, existential themes that will be relevant 1,000 years from now. When many of the things that are successful and trendy today will have been long relegated to musty-looking antiques, his stuff will still be great. There are 3 things Jewish people worship: God, Chinese food, and wall-to-wall carpeting. The food in this place is really terrible. Yes, and such small portions. That's essentially how I feel about life. I'm going to my psychoanalyst 1 more year, then I'm going to Lourdes. My wife is immature. Whenever I take a bath, she sinks my boats. Because it's much more pleasant to be obsessed over how the hero gets out of his predicament than it is over how I get out of mine. She wore a short skirt and a tight sweater, and her figure described a set of parabolas that could cause cardiac arrest in a yak. I'm so excited. I think today I'm going to brush all my teeth. I think you should defend to the death their right to march, and then go down and meet them with baseball bats. On the KKK. Those who can't do, teach. 90% of success in life is showing up. If 90% of success in life is showing up, the other 10% depends on what you're showing up for. At the trial, Stubbs chose to act as his own lawyer, but a conflict over his fee led to ill feelings. Astronomers say the universe is finite, which is a comforting thought for those people who can't remember where they leave things. Sex is like having dinner. Sometimes you joke about the dishes, sometimes you take the meal seriously. The chief problem about death is the fear that there may be no afterlife, a depressing thought. I don't believe in an afterlife, but I'm taking an extra pair of underwear just in case. What if the worst is true? What if there's no God, and you only go around once, and that's it? Don't you want to be a part of the experience? You know, what the hell? It's not all a drag, and I'm thinking to myself, geez, I should stop ruining my life searching for answers I'm never gonna get and just enjoy it while it lasts. And, you know, after who knows? Maybe there is something, nobody really knows. I know that maybe is a very slim reed to hang your whole life on, but that's the best we have. The government is unresponsive to the needs of the little man. Under 5 feet 7 inches, it is impossible to get your congressman on the phone. When you start putting a higher value on works of art than people, you're forfeiting your humanity. The best an idea gets is when it's in your head. I don't know enough to be incompetent. Should I marry W? Not if she won't tell me the other letters in her name. And what about her career? How can I ask a woman of her beauty to give up the roller derby? Decisions. Subjectivity is objective. Then Job fell to his knees and cried to the Lord, Thine is the kingdom and the power and glory. Thou hast a good job. Don't blow it. There is dignity in suffering, nobility in pain, but failure is a salted wound that burns and burns again. A Bay Area bisexual told me I didn't quite coincide with either of her desires. Meanwhile, the minute you put on the dotted line you're Sam Hancock, and before a notary, you'll not only get the negative but Elsie makes a wonderful stuffed cabbage which we'll include gratis a few portions but return the jars please. I was thrown out of NYU for cheating with the dean's wife. I learned a few things on my own since, and modified some of the things he taught me, but everything, unequivocally, that I learned about comedy writing I learned from Danny Simon. My mind can never know my body, although it has become quite friendly with my legs. I do occasionally envy the person who is religious naturally, without being brainwashed into it or suckered into it by all the organized hustles. More than at any other time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness. The other, to total extinction. Let us pray we have the wisdom to choose correctly. I speak, by the way, not with any sense of futility, but with a panicky conviction of the absolute meaninglessness of existence which could easily be misinterpreted as pessimism. It is not. It is merely a healthy concern for the predicament of modern man. I think crime pays. The hours are good, you travel a lot. He adored New York City. He idolized it all out of proportion. No, make that. He romanticized it all out of proportion. Yes. To him, no matter what the season was, this was still a town that existed in black and white and pulsated to the great tunes of George Gershwin. Basically, I am a low-culture person. I prefer watching baseball with a beer and some meatballs. You're still searching for me in every woman. You'll always seek to duplicate what we had. You know it. In perpetrating a revolution, there are two requirements: someone or something to revolt against and someone to actually show up and do the revolting. Dress is usually casual and both parties may be flexible about time and place, but if either faction fails to attend, the whole enterprise is likely to come off badly. People always ask me, do you ever think you'll wake up one morning and not be funny? That thought would never occur to me. It's an odd thought and not realistic. Because funny and me are not separate. We're one. If you don't fail now and again, it's a sign you're playing it safe. I've had bad luck in my 2 previous marriages. The first wife left me, and the second did not. It's just gossip, you know. Gossip is the new pornography. I can't even make a leap of faith to believe in my own existence. After 60, all of us belong to the weaker sex. I always thought that as long as man is mortal, he will never be relaxed. All the crap they tell you about getting joy and having a kind of wisdom in your golden years, it's all tripe. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes. Interestingly, in my case, I share that honor with the Prospect Park Zoo. Take the money and run. Sex is better than talk. Ask anybody in this bar. Talk is what you suffer through so you can get to sex. My Lord, what hast thou done lately? You're a genius. And the proof is that both common people and intellectuals find your work completely incoherent. Cynicism is reality with an alternate spelling. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you. Sex on Twitter can't hurt you, unless you fall off. If you're not failing, you're not trying anything. Spencer was searching for a woman interested in gold, inorganic chemistry, outdoor sex, and the music of Bach. In short, he was looking for himself, only female. The key point about a demonstration is that it must be seen. Hence the term demonstration. If a person demonstrates privately in his own home, this is not technically a demonstration but merely acting silly or behaving like an ass. If you are not failing now and again, it's a sign you are not doing anything very innovative. Isn't all mankind ultimately executed for a crime it never committed? They confuse everything I do with my life. Every success is built on the ability to do better than good enough. As you climb the ladder of success, be sure it's leaning against the right building. 80% of success is showing up. I don't get depressed, I grow a tumor instead. No, I'm a lowbrow. I read Dostoevsky more out of obligation than enjoyment. For enjoyment, for me, it's a beer and the football game. What was the scandal? I fell in love with this girl, married her. We have been married for almost 15 years now. My relationship with American audiences is the exact same as it always has been. They never came to see my films, and they don't come now. One man starving puts a crimp in my evening. Life is like a concentration camp. You can't leave without dying. I always feel, I guess being a product of the movies of the 40s where movies were the greatest things and screens were big and palaces and stars were larger than life, that reality was so much inferior to what we felt was conceivably possible from what we had seen in the movies. I've never had a block. I'm talking within the limits of my abilities. But in my own small way, I've had an embarrassment of riches. I'll have 5 ideas and I'm dying to do them all. It takes weeks or months where I agonize and obsess over which to do next. I wish sometimes someone would choose for me. If someone said, do idea number 3 next, that would be fine. But I have never had any sense of running dry. Better not think too much. Relying more on the body, it is more trustworthy. I wouldn't necessarily want to be a big muscular guy. It's nice to be gorgeous whether you're male or female, assuming you don't lose whatever else you have. If you aren't failing every now and then, you're probably playing it too safe. Let's say there was a burning building and you could rush in and you could save only one thing, either the last known copy of Shakespeare's plays or some anonymous human being. What would you do? Money is not everything, but it is better than having one's health. My films are a form of psychoanalysis, except that it is I who am paid, which changes everything. I don't why whatever works and whatever doesn't. You just make the film that you enjoy making at the time, and you think there's a good chance that people might enjoy the story. You're surprised pleasantly when they do. It's just luck. An audience conditioned by a lifetime of television watching is so corrupted that their standards have been systematically lowered over the years. These guys sit in front of their sets and the gamma rays eat the white cells of their brains out. Is there a separation between body and mind, and if so, which is it better to have? When I'm not working, I think, and I think when I get depressed. I've always believed that thoughtful people don't really take the tabloids seriously. They're basically a form of entertainment. I enjoy them as much as the next New Yorker. When a man is driving in a car and looks out the window and notices a woman with a great body, as he strains to check her face out, how does she know to keep turning so the back of her head is always toward him? They were doing The Dying Swan at the ballet. And there was a rumor that some bookmarkers had drifted into town from upstate New York and that they had fixed the bullet. There was a lot of money bet on the swan to live. The dictatorship is shut up, democracy is always concerned. Is old age really so terrible? Not if you've brushed your teeth faithfully. I work for a company that makes deceptively shallow serving dishes for Chinese restaurants. You will notice that what we are aiming at when we fall in love is a very strange paradox. The paradox consists of the fact that, when we fall in love, we are seeking to re-find all or some of the people to whom we were attached as children. On the other hand, we ask our beloved to correct all of the wrongs that these early parents or siblings inflicted upon us. So that love contains in it the contradiction, the attempt to return to the past and the attempt to undo the past. I'm very old-fashioned. I believe that people should stay married for life, like pigeons and Catholics. I have a limitless amount of great music at my disposal, and it's very, very pleasurable because when the music goes on the film it's amazing how much it livens up the film and gives it an emotional kick in the pants, sort of. When the Academy called, I panicked. I thought they might want their Oscars back, and the pawn shop has been out of business for a while. How is it possible to find meaning in a finite world, given my waist and shirt size? The whole country was tied together by radio. We all experienced the same heroes and comedians and singers. They were giants. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I'm 237 years old, I should be collecting Social Security. I myself don't like to speak to the actors at all. I like to hire great people and let them do their thing. I don't like to speak to them. I don't like to have lunch with them. I don't like to socialize with them. I don't like to hear their ideas. Well, trouble's my middle name. Actually, my middle name is Marion, but I don't want you spreading that around. Humorists always sit at the children's table. For God's sakes, this is a woman I was married to for 10 years. We made love. I'd hold her head over the toilet bowl when she threw up. One filmmaker makes films that are deep, intellectual, profound and confrontational. And the other one makes purely vacuous, escapist films. I'm not sure the one who makes escapist films is making a poorer contribution than the one who makes the deeper films. 21 years ago, when I first heard Mia Farrow had accused me of child molestation, I found the idea so ludicrous I didn't give it a second thought. We were involved in a terribly acrimonious breakup, with great enmity between us and a custody battle slowly gathering energy. The self-serving transparency of her malevolence seemed so obvious I didn't even hire a lawyer to defend myself. It was my show business attorney who told me she was bringing the accusation to the police and I would need a criminal lawyer. Does art imitate life, or does life imitate TV? You make films whether they're dramas or comedies about neurotic people, flawed people, interesting personality traits. To make them about calm, stable, untroubled people isn't interesting. The history of the world is like, He kills me, I kill him, only with different cosmetics and different castings. So in 2001, some fanatics killed some Americans, and now some Americans are killing some Iraqis. And in my childhood, some Nazis killed Jews. And now, some Jewish people and some Palestinians are killing each other. There's nothing sexier than a lapsed Catholic. I have a hyperactive imagination, my mind tends to jump around a little, and I have some trouble between fantasy and reality. Marriage? That's for life. It's like cement. I never ever see a film of mine after I release it to the public. I see it when I shoot it in my dailies and while I'm editing it, re-editing it and reshooting it and all that. By the time it's finished I never want to see it again. I don't respond well to mellow, you know what I mean. I have a tendency to, if I get too mellow, I ripen and then rot. Achilles only had an Achilles heel. I have an entire Achilles body. Showing up is 80% of life. I would never want to belong to any club that would have someone like me for a member. Death is an acquired trait. Of all human weakness, obsession is the most dangerous. And the silliest. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy myself, but I didn't. Sometimes the critics will like a film, and the public doesn't come. Sometimes the critics won't like the film, and the public will come. It's completely spontaneous. It's a hazard. My parents were very old world. They come from Brooklyn, which is the heart of the old world. Their values in life are God and carpeting. I, interestingly, had dated a woman in the Eisenhower administration briefly. And it was ironic to me, 'cause I was trying to do to her what Eisenhower has been doing to the country for the last 8 years. Nothing worth knowing can be understood with the mind. You make a film and always hope you're going to make Citizen Kane or The Bicycle Thief. You make the film, and for one reason or another, one clicks and one doesn't, but it's out of your control completely. The man who said, "I'd rather be lucky than good," saw deeply into life. People are afraid to face how great a part of life is dependent on luck. It's scary to think so much is out of one's control. There are moments in a match when the ball hits the top of the net and for a split second it can either go forward or fall back. With a little luck it goes forward and you win. Or maybe it doesn't and you lose. To me there's no real difference between a fortune teller or a fortune cookie and any of the organized religions. They're all equally valid or invalid, really. And equally helpful. Between the Pope and air conditioning, I'd choose air conditioning. The Great Roe is a mythological beast with the head of a lion and the body of a lion, though not the same lion. I'm sure there are people in Hollywood, whose main drive in film is to make money, who will feel that any use of the word hijacking or any reference to anything violent or remotely associated with the terrible tragedy that occurred will lose customers for them. And that will be the only criterion that will matter, and so they'll force the minions that work for them to remove these things from their movies, or not make movies about that subject. I can't understand why more people aren't bisexual. It would double your chances for a date on Saturday night. Sylvia Plath. Interesting poetess whose tragic suicide was misinterpreted as romantic by the college girl mentality. You can be with your wife, very happily married, and then you meet some woman and you love her. But you love your wife, too. And you also love that one. Or if she's met some man and she loves the man and she loves you. And then you meet somebody else and now there are three of you. Why only one person? It figures you've got to hate yourself if you've got any integrity at all. In New York State they have a strange law that says you can't get a divorce unless you can prove adultery, and it's weird, because the 10 Commandments say, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." But New York State says you have to. Well, finally, what happened was that my wife committed adultery for me. She's always been more mechanically inclined than I have. My heart says one thing. My head says another. Very hard to get your heart and head together in life. If I could just hope to have a major talent, then I would rather have it in music than in any other field. All things are possible, except skiing through a revolving door. I didn't know he was dead, I thought he was British. I don't believe in God. Just try getting a plumber on the weekend. When I am in New York, I want to be in Europe, and when I am in Europe, I want to be in New York. If I had my life to live over, I wish I could be a great pianist or something. I feel about New York as a child whose father is a bank robber. Not perfect, but I still love him. Everything in life turns out to be a distraction from the real thing you want to do. There are a million distractions, and when I was a kid I was very disciplined. I knew that the other kids weren't. I was the one able to do the thing, not because I had more talent, maybe less, but because they simply weren't applying themselves. Is sex dirty? Only if it's done right. I never thought I was doing anyone a favor by bringing children into the world. With people as cruel to each other as they are, it's a terrible proposition. The best of lives are sad and tragic. The best of them. My general conclusion is that it's not a nice thing to do. The world doesn't need it. The kid doesn't need it. I was a smart kid and I was not understood by my parents. Believing would be easier if God would show himself by depositing $1 million in a Swiss bank account in my name. What I do know about physics is that to a man standing on the shore, time passes quicker than to a man on a boat, especially if the man on the boat is with his wife. People always tease me. They say, "Look at you, you went for so much psychoanalysis and you're so neurotic, you wind up marrying a girl so much younger than you." The most important words in the English language are not, "I love you," but, "It's benign." Manu the bull is so skinny they save money on road trips. They just fax him from city to city. I can't express anger. I grow a tumor instead. I don't like to meet the actor and have a lot of conferences and talk about their sub-life and their off-screen life and their backstories and all that nonsense, because it never means anything. I don't inhale because it gives you cancer, but I look so incredibly handsome with a cigarette that I can't not hold one. The baby is fine. The only problem is that he looks like Edward G. Robinson. As an artist, you are always striving toward an ultimate achievement but never seem to reach it. You shoot a film, and the result could have always been better. You try again, and fail once more. In some ways I find it enjoyable. You never lose sight of your goal. I don't do my job to make money or to break box office records, I simply try things out. What would happen if I were to achieve perfection at some point? What would I do then? As I got more confident, I was able to let actors improvise, and do long takes. It's 10%, 5% you learn and experience. The rest you just have or you don't have. Yes, but the difference is that when you're dead and somebody yells, "Everybody up, it's morning," it's very hard to find your slippers. This sounds so bleak when I say it, but we need some delusions to keep us going. And the people who successfully delude themselves seem happier than the people who can't. With films, I just scribble a couple of notes for a scene. You don't have to do any writing at all, you just have your notes for the scene, which are written with the actors and the camera in mind. The actual script is a necessity for casting and budgeting, but the end product often doesn't bear much resemblance to the script, at least in my case. You are much more dependent on luck than you think. People say if you want to have a good relationship, you have to work at it. But you never hear it about anything you really like, about sailing or going to soccer games. The film studios learn to our dismay but to their pleasure that if they spent $200 million making a film they could make $500 million on it. So they were not interested anymore in quality films. They can't afford to be that risky at those prices. Consequently, you're getting a lot of remakes, sequels, dopey comedies full of toilet jokes. I prefer to achieve immortality by not dying. There are worse things than death. Many of them playing at a theater near you. And Nietzsche, with his theory of eternal recurrence. He said that the life we lived we're going to live over again the exact same way for eternity. Great. That means I'll have to sit through the ice capita again. Life is full of moments that are good, winning a lottery, seeing a beautiful woman, a great dinner, but the whole thing is tragic. It's an oasis that is very pleasant. Science is an intellectual dead end, you know. It's a lot of little guys in tweed suits cutting up frogs on foundation grants. I cannot say for certain that God does not exist. I think the worst thing that can be said about him is that he's a bit of an underachiever. Some people want to achieve immortality through their works or their descendants. I prefer to achieve immortality by not dying. I think that the tendency for most people is to fall back on a comic interpretation of things because things are so sad, so terrible. If you didn't laugh you'd kill yourself. But the truth of the matter is that existence in general is very, very tragic, very, very sad, very brutal and very unhappy. In real life, Keaton believes in God. But she also believes that the radio works because there are tiny people inside it. I loathed every day and regret every day I spent in school. I like to be taught to read and write and add and then be left alone. I have a great admiration for English actors and actresses and have used them at every opportunity over the years, but now I won't have to import them to New York. It's all through the actors. I cannot write in that idiom. I never considered myself an artist. I aspire to be an artist, but I never thought I had the depth or substance or gift to be an artist. I do think I have some talent, but it doesn't go as far as being an artist. It's hard for me to know. I'll think, I really brought off my ideas, it's great, and no one sparks to it. I am told the settlement of $5 million I am being paid is the largest amount ever paid under the New York right to privacy law. But what if everyone in the world behaved like me and came here and shot Brosseau through the ear? What a mess. And of course we'd need valet parking. There's nothing good about getting older, absolutely nothing, because the amount of wisdom and experience you gain is negligible compared to what you lose. You do gain a couple of things. You gain a little bittersweet and sour wisdom from your heartbreaks and failures and things, but what you lose is so catastrophic in every way. The heart is a very, very resilient little muscle. It really is. I don't want to live on in my work. I want to live on in my apartment. Film is more of novelty, because I've done so much theater over many years. I'm in love with making movies. Also, I find it easier to remember 3 minutes of dialogue than 3 hours. My brain. That's my second favorite organ. Rather than live on in the hearts and minds of my fellow man, I would rather live on in my apartment. I don't want to live forever through my work. I want to live forever by not dying. For some reason I'm more appreciated in France than I am back home. The subtitles must be incredibly good. Real life is generally much duller and inevitably sadder, most of the time. In film, you control everything that's going on, so you can indulge the most fantastic, romantic, escapist feelings and fantasies. You can do anything you want. That's why it's very seductive and pleasurable to earn your living making movies, because you're not living in the real world. The two biggest myths about me are that I'm an intellectual, because I wear these glasses, and that I'm an artist because my films lose money. Those two myths have been prevalent for many years. I read in self-defense. Our love will last forever. It's forever, but it just doesn't work. That's why it will always be romantic, because it cannot be complete. Love may be the answer, but even though you're watching for the solution, intercourse raises some rather interesting thoughts. Your audience teaches you how to be funny. You always think another time would have been ideal for you. The reality is there was no Novocaine when you went to the dentist. Life is for the living. Enthusiasm is a good engine, but it needs intelligence for a driver. I love the rain, it washes memories off the sidewalk of life. Psychoanalysis is like music lessons. For 5 years you do not notice any progress and suddenly you can play the piano. I'm short enough and ugly enough to succeed on my own. None of the arts are any good unless you really are great at them. Some of the best memories of my childhood that I have are the times that I played hooky from school so I could spend my days in the public library reading all the wonderful books at my disposal. My father owned a small piece of land. He carried it with him wherever he went. Don't you see the rest of the country looks upon New York like we're left-wing, communist, Jewish, homosexual pornographers? I think of us that way sometimes and I live here. One of the interesting things is, the most gifted people, the biggest people, have no problem taking small roles. The heart wants what it wants. We are the sum total of our choices. I've come to the conclusion that the artist cannot justify life or come up with a cogent reason as to why life is meaningful, but the artist can provide you with a cold glass of water on a hot day. Real software engineers don't debug programs, they verify correctness. This process doesn't necessarily involve execution of anything on a computer, except perhaps a correctness verification aid package. Sex without love is an empty experience, but, as empty experiences go, it's one of the best. To be a film director is not a democracy, it's really a tyranny. You're the head of the project, for better rather than worse. I write the film and I direct the film, I decide who's going to be in it, I decide on the editing, I put in the music from my own record collection. We laughed over it, and Hemingway punched me in the mouth. There's nothing like the discovery of an unknown work by a great thinker to set the intellectual community a-twitter and cause academics to dart about like those things one sees when looking at a drop of water under a microscope. I like filming in New York a lot myself, but London is accommodating to me. The weather's very good there and the conditions for shooting and the financial conditions. The artistic conditions are good, so it's a pleasant place to shoot. If you aren't failing, you aren't trying. Someday the lion is going to lie down with the lamb, but the lamb isn't going to get much sleep. It's funny. Maria Elena and I, we are meant for each other and not meant for each other. It's a contradiction. Music has always helped my films. In The Curse of the Jade Scorpion, you can hear Sunrise by Glenn Miller, an idol of my childhood, in the surprise ending. I like mixing comedy with suspense and action. I'll work by myself for years and then I'll think it'll be fun to eat one of my friends like Marshall Brickman or Doug McGrath into a room and not be alone for the writing of the thing, to have the pleasure of taking walks and get lunch together. It's sort of a fun process, and then I do it and then I get back on my own for a while until I feel the need to do it again. I like writing. It keeps my mind off grim subjects. It's therapeutic in the same way a patient in an institution is given finger paints. A tree never hits an automobile except in self-defense. I sued American Apparel because they calculatingly took my name, my likeness and image and used them publicly to promote their business. I don't want to be immortal through my works. I want to be immortal by not dying. I spend a lot of time idly. I go to sporting events, play my clarinet. I practice. But if you work every day, a certain amount on a steady basis, the work accumulates. I was raised in the Jewish tradition, taught never to marry a Gentile woman, shave on a Saturday night and, most especially, never to shave a Gentile woman on a Saturday night. Notes for a ballet, The Spell. Suddenly Sigmund hears the flutter of wings, and a group of wild swans flies across the moon. Sigmund is astounded to see that their leader is part swan and part woman, unfortunately, divided lengthwise. She enchants Sigmund, who is careful not to make any poultry jokes. In 1940 I was just turning 5 years old and being taken to the movies. For those of us who were not old enough to understand the horror of war, it was a very romantic era because these guys were kissing their wives and girlfriends goodbye and going off to fight and become heroes. She had been critical of his new Torch song, A Side Order of Heartache, Please, suggesting it could be used as a good way to break in their new paper shredder. What is it about death that bothers me? Probably the hours. Do I believe in God? I did until Mother's accident. She fell on some meat loaf and it penetrated her spleen. I wish I was writing something much more heavy each time I did a film, and that the comedies just occasionally come out. But unfortunately you're stuck with what you're born with. My success has allowed me to strike out with a higher class of women. The meaning of life is that nobody knows the meaning of life. I write the script, nobody sees it, not the people that put the money in the picture. I cast who I want, and make the film. That's why I've always felt the only thing standing between me and greatness is me. There's no excuse for me not to be great except that I'm not. I think if you have a comic perspective, almost anything that happens you tend to put through a comic filter. It's a way of coping in the short term, but has no long-term effect and requires constant, endless renewal. Hence people talk of comics who are always on. It's like constantly drugging your sensibility so you can get by with less pain. I said this to my daughter, if you don't practice the guitar, when you get older you wouldn't be able to play it. It's that simple. If you want to play the guitar, you put a half hour in every day, but you have to do it. 90% of success is turning up. Visually I've always liked the 20s-30s for film. I do these because I like the music. I like the clothes. I like the way the women and the guys look. There are soldiers and sailors and gangsters with the machine guns in their violin cases. It's a very colorful era of New York, full of great theater and great nightclubs and great jazz. I love baseball. You know, it doesn't have to mean anything. It's just very beautiful to watch. I call that mind free which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which calls no man master, which does not content itself with a passive or hereditary faith, and receives new truth as an angel from heaven. Culturally speaking, I was raised in a Jewish household. In addition to the religious side of it, I was taught respect for books and learning and the higher professions like medicine and law and teaching. Stanley Kubrick was a great artist and a perfectionist. He always wanted the exact right thing. He did a million takes. Everything had to be perfect. I'm an imperfectionist. I don't really care that much about the work. I write quickly. I'm careless. I shoot carelessly. My experience creatively is different than my experience in life, for, as my father would say, the simple reason that you can't get hurt when everything goes wrong creatively. Comedians have a tendency to have a limited range. They tend to do one thing and do it very well, but it's limited. People still have existential anxiety. It just may not be expressed in Hebraic idiom. In certain areas I don't function well, and in other areas I function very well. I'm very good professionally. I have good discipline. I'm able to write every day and do films and not go 6 times over the budget. I mean, I'm a coherent person, but I also don't like to go through tunnels when I travel. I'm claustrophobic. If you can delude yourself by believing that there is some kind of Santa Claus out there who is going to bail you out in the end, then it will help you get through. Even if you are proven wrong in the end, you would have had a better life than a non-believer. I feel that life is divided into the horrible and the miserable. That's the 2 categories. The horrible are like, I don't know, terminal cases, you know, and blind people, crippled. I don't know how they get through life. It's amazing to me. And the miserable is everyone else. So you should be thankful that you're miserable, because that's very lucky, to be miserable. New York is my home and I have a particular fondness for it. I think it's a place where you can generate any kind of story wonderfully. But I also would be very happy to make a film in Paris or Rome. I think I've gotten technically better over the years, but you'd have to be a fool not to. I've made so many movies that by sheer quantity you get better at the technique. I've often felt that life is a hard deal and it's unrelentingly tragic and an uphill fight. That's the way I feel about the world. There are certain problems that can only be dealt with that way, going out and doing them. As ugly a truth as that is, I do think it's the truth about the world. What people who don't write don't understand is that they think you make up the line consciously, but you don't. It proceeds from your unconscious. So it's the same surprise to you when it emerges as it is to the audience when the comic says it. I don't think of the joke and then say it. I say it and then realize what I've said. And I laugh at it, because I'm hearing it for the first time myself. I can do a limited amount of things and that's what I do, and I feel comfortable doing it, and I have no particular desire to do anything else as an actor. Photons have mass. I didn't even know they were Catholic. I prefer the magic to reality, and have since I was 5 years old. Hopefully, I can continue to make films and constantly escape into them. Drama, it would be as if you wrote some poetry. You'd run the risk of being embarrassed if people read it, because you're pouring your heart out and you're not mitigating it with any humor or anything. For a while we pondered whether to take a vacation or get a divorce. We decided that a trip to Bermuda is over in 2 weeks, but a divorce is something you always have. I think aging has nothing to recommend it. You don't gain any wisdom as the years go by. You fall apart, is what happens. People try and put a nice varnish on it, and say, well, you mellow. You come to understand life and accept things. But you'd trade all of that for being 35 again. I have no idea what I am doing, but incompetence has never prevented me from plunging in with enthusiasm. Years of insanity have made this guy crazy. I always write the same way. I always write with a yellow pad and a ballpoint pen on my bed. And then I go and type it up afterwards. I've always done that. Those things become habitual. Me and nature are two. I'm a teleological, existential agnostic. History is the same thing over and over again. When I'm writing something, if there's a part that's good for me, then I'll play it. Otherwise, I don't. And I notice that there are less and less parts for me in my own writing. The true test of maturity is not how old a person is, but how he reacts to awakening in the Midtown area in his shorts. All I have in my life is my imagination. Maybe the poets are right. Maybe love is the only answer. I believe people ought to mate for life, like pigeons or Catholics. When I naturally write a story and I feel that the guy is sitting across the table from the girl and flirting with her, I think, God, that can't be me, because I'm just too old for that part. You need a 30-year-old or a 35-year-old for that part. And so I've given myself less and less roles. Me sitting down for dinner with Ingmar Bergman felt like a house painter sitting down with Picasso. You know how you're always trying to get things to come out perfect in art because it's real difficult in life. Interestingly, according to modern astronomers, space is finite. This is a very comforting thought, particularly for people who can never remember where they have left things. There's a tacit agreement between myself and the audience that I will entertain them when they buy their ticket, and I've been the one that has screwed that up. Once in a while I indulge myself and try something else, and I keep my fingers crossed that it will come out good and there'll be enough people who will enjoy it. But that doesn't often happen. When I started out, I was a television writer, and we wrote a television show that was on live every week. And you didn't have the luxury of coming in and waiting to be inspired. You came in and you had to write. And you wrote, because it was going to be live on the air. So I can do that. Anything worth knowing cannot be understood by the human mind. It's a wonderful thing to be able to create your own world whenever you want to. I always feel the cynicism is reality with maybe an alternate spelling or something, because I feel that I have real perspective on this particular issue of punishment in society. I do the movies just for myself, like an institutionalized person who basket weaves. Busy fingers are happy fingers. I don't care about the films. I don't care if they're flushed down the toilet after I die. The comedies are not a million laughs on the set. It's business, and the dramas are business as well, really. When I'm writing it, I struggle more with drama because I started out in comedy. When we lose 20 pounds, we may be losing the 20 best pounds we have. We may be losing the pounds that contain our genius, our humanity, our love and honesty. I'm a comedian. I make comic films, and there are certain ideas that occur to me that are comic, with heavy, serious undertones. There are some ideas that are more frivolous to me. The next idea that could occur to me could be comedy about death and famine or something. I am an only child. I have one sister. Don't think of death as an ending. Think of it as a really effective way of cutting down your expenses. I'd always wanted to be a dramatic. Comedy comes more naturally to me. I can do it with more facility. So I feel more comfortable with it. I can't with any conscience argue for New York with anyone. It's like Calcutta. But I love the city in an emotional, irrational way, like loving your mother or your father even though they're a drunk or a thief. I've loved the city my whole life. To me, it's like a great woman. I'm going to kill myself. I should go to Paris and jump off the Eiffel Tower. I'll be dead. You know, in fact, if I get the Concorde, I could be dead 3 hours earlier, which would be perfect. Or wait a minute. With the time change, I could be alive for 6 hours in New York, but dead 3 hours in Paris. I could get things done, and I could also be dead. I don't like theatrical actors and actresses. I like people that talk like real human beings. 90% of life is just showing up. I always thought it would be very funny if I was a blind film director. I believe that sex is a beautiful thing between two people. Between 5, it's fantastic. People think I'm an artist because my films lose money. I hate reality, but it's still the best place to get a good steak. Man was made in God's image. Do you really think God has red hair and glasses? Those modern analysts, they charge so much. In my day, for 5 marks Freud himself would treat you. For 10 marks he would treat you and press your pants. For 15 marks Freud would let you treat him. That included a choice of any 2 vegetables. Relationships are really what interest me the most. And I think, in the end, they interest most people the most. Even when you read Tolstoy or something, basically they're about man and woman relationships. If it turns out that there is a God, the worst that you can say about him is that basically he's an underachiever. The audience goes to sleep really quickly. If you have a slight pause at the wrong time, that's it. I'm really impotent against the overwhelming bleakness of the universe, and the only thing I can do is my little gift, filmmaking, and do it the best I can, which is cold comfort. You rely too much on brain. The brain is the most overrated organ. I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I want to achieve immortality through not dying. I don't want to live on in the hearts of my countrymen. I want to live on in my apartment. In the shower, with the hot water coming down, you've left the real world behind, and very frequently things open up for you. It's the change of venue, the unblocking, the attempt to force the ideas that's crippling you when you're trying to write. I know of only 6 genuine comic geniuses in movie history: Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Groucho Marx, Harpo Marx, Peter Sellers, and W.C. Fields. I don't believe in competition for artistic things. I just like the atmosphere of the Cannes Festival. I don't want to win anything or lose anything. Sex is the most fun you can have without laughing. My mother never had time for me. When you're the middle child in a family of 5 million, you don't get any attention. Talent is luck. The important thing in life is courage. I never have an alter ego in the movies. That's a fiction that the press has made up over the years, and it's fun to write that. It gives them something to write. I can make films. And some of them come out good, and some of them come out better, and some of them come out worse. But I've been very lucky over the years to be able to sustain the length of career that I've had. Capital punishment would be more effective as a preventive measure if it were administered prior to the crime. The only thing standing between me and greatness is me. There is no justice, there is no rational structure to it, life. That is just the way it is, and each person figures out some way to cope with it. It has become harder and harder in the United States to make films unhampered by outside influences. I've always been able to steer clear of that and keep the business people out of my hair completely. Love is too weak a word for what I feel. I love you, you know, I love you, I love you, 2 F's, yes. The whole thrust of science and the medical profession is to try and prevent it from happening, to try to prolong life, to keep you from dying, to keep you from getting older, to rejuvenate you. I mean, that's everybody's wish. The fountain of youth is everybody's sought-after thing. Sex without love is an empty experience. But as empty experiences go, it's one of the best. I can't minimize the terror factor. As you get older you get more and more frightened because the terrible indignities of old age become closer to you. You can't control life. It doesn't wind up perfectly. Only art you can control. Art and masturbation. 2 areas in which I am an absolute expert. If I just got up in the morning and had no place to go and was retired or something, I would sit there and I would be thinking, gee, what is the purpose of life? Why are we all finite? Why do we get old and die? Is there nothing out there? Why is it so tragic? Why do our loved ones perish? Why do we generate? So who wants to think about that stuff? I would not like to live in the past because you don't get anesthetic when you go to the dentist. You don't get antibiotics. You don't get the things that you are used to now, cell phones and televisions and things that are very convenient. You don't want that. But, it would be fun if you could, every now and then, just meet a friend for lunch at Maxim's in Paris in 1900, or go back to 1870 just for a couple of hours. Take a walk in the park, and then come right back to Broadway. When you write the script, you're home in a room by yourself, and you're writing, and there's no connection with the real performing world. So you get a lot of things wrong and make a lot of mistakes and make a lot of bad choices. It seems to me that making escapist films might be a better service to people than making intellectual ones and making films that deal with issues. It might be better to just make escapist comedies that don't touch on any issues. The people just get a cool lemonade, and then they go out refreshed, they enjoy themselves. They forget how awful things are and it helps them, it strengthens them to get through the day. If I had my choice in life I would have had the gifts of Tennessee Williams or Eugene O'Neill. Unfortunately my gifts lie in comedy and so comedy comes fairly easy to me and I occasionally have an idea for a very serious piece and I do it. But the ideas don't come that readily to me. If I could change the structure of existence I would do it. I could see a better way to live for everybody. All literature is a footnote to Faust. I have no idea what I mean by that. A general philosophy of the female characters in my films is they all want something to believe in, and not having anything. For me personally, because I do it myself, the scoring of a picture is fun. I edit the picture and when I've finished I go into my room and I have many records, jazz, classical and popular music. And I have this all at my disposal. I don't have to get a composer. A fast word about oral contraception. I was involved in an extremely good example of oral contraception 2 weeks ago. I asked a girl to go to bed with me, she said no. I do feel it's important to have some kind of faith in something, but it is impossible for many of us. I personally don't have any faith in anything, but it's great if you can. For some reason it gives people pleasure to equate the life of certain movie actors or actresses with their actual lives. I feel humor is important for those two reasons, that it is a little bit of refreshment like music, and that women have told me over the years that it is very important to them. Some people are funny, and some people are not funny. Many people who are not funny can make a living at it. You don't have to be great to make a living at it. Just like a doctor who doesn't have to be great can still make a living out of it. The study of economy usually shows us that the best time for purchase was last year. I think a relationship is like a shark. It has to constantly move forward or it dies. I'm a big believer in supporting the action on film with the appropriate music. It covers a multitude of sins. It's gotten me out of a lot of jams over the years. So, music for me is a very big thing in films and I use it unashamedly. People are always talking about the dumbing down of the country. I've never been satisfied or even pleased with a film that I've done. I make them, I'm finished, I've never looked at one after. I don't like them because there's a big gap between what you conceive in your mind when you're writing and you don't have to meet the test of reality. You're home, you write and it's funny and beautiful and romantic and dramatic, and then you have to show up on a cold morning. And you don't have enough of this and this goes wrong and you make the wrong choice on something and you screwed up and you can't go back. Life is tough and it's tough whether you're famous or not famous. And in the end it's probably better to be famous because the perks are better. You get better seats at the basketball game, and you get better tables and reservations places. If I call a doctor on Saturday morning I can get him. There's a lot of things, indulgences that you don't get, if you're not famous. Now I'm not saying it's fair. But I can't say that I don't enjoy it. Jazz is a big thing with me. It's a very big passion of mine, to play it. I'm an amateur musician and I love everything about it. I was obsessed with jazz when I was 15 years old and I know a lot about it because I've loved it so much. I'd never join a club that would allow a person like me to become a member. Magic has always been of a great interest of mine. I was an amateur magician when I was young. I used to practice and read up on it a lot. I'm well aware of the history of magic. There's something about my films. They're informed by my sensibility. I have the same preoccupations, the same interests. There's just something in the nuance, and so you always know it's a film of mine whether I sign my name to it or not. Years ago I was on television having a discussion with Billy Graham about atheism. He was saying, even if you're right and I'm wrong, and there's nothing after, I will have had a better life than you, because I do believe there was something. And I couldn't argue with that, even though I wanted to. When you travel around the country, you see what a tough town New York is, rude, competitive, a town where good, logical ideas are ignored in favor of unworkable ones. And yet, all these other towns are so dead and boring compared to New York. I always felt that the problems of the world would never ever be solved until people came to terms with the deeper issues, spiritual, that there would be an aimless reshuffling of world leaders and governments and programs. My gift was in comedy. I found out I could make jokes. I could tell jokes. I could write them. So over the years, that's what I've done. All over the world, relationships between men and women are very, very tricky and very difficult and you don't learn anything. It's not an exact science, so you can't learn anything. You're always going by instinct and your instinct betrays you because you want what you want when you want it. There's no correlation between what the public likes and what I'm after. I'm in a different world. There's an old joke, two elderly women are at a Catskill mountain resort, and one of them says, "Boy, the food at this place is really terrible." The other one says, "Yeah, I know, and such small portions." Well, that's essentially how I feel about life, full of loneliness, and misery, and suffering, and unhappiness, and it's all over much too quickly. The heart wants what it wants. There's no logic to these things. You meet someone and you fall in love and that's that. All men are mortal. Socrates was mortal. Therefore, all men are Socrates. I think, on both sides of the camera or the novel, distraction. I'm obsessed with, can I get this actress or my third act to work? I'm distracted. I'm interested in that so I don't sit home and think, gee, life is meaningless. We're all going to die. The universe is pulling apart at breakneck speed. Today I saw a red and yellow sunset and thought, how insignificant I am. Of course, I thought that yesterday too, and it rained. I took a test in existentialism. I left all the answers blank and got 100. I never wanted to or expected to make a film outside of New York. New York became very, very expensive. The same $18 million spent in Barcelona or Rome goes much further there. When one chooses to be a writer, psychologically there's a reason for that because you like the isolation and you like to be by yourself and you are by nature timid. If there is reincarnation, I'd like to come back as Warren Beatty's fingertips. Sentence structure is innate, but whining is acquired. And my parents finally realize I'm kidnapped and they snap into action immediately. They rent out my room. Is sex dirty? Only when it's being done right. Reality may not be the best of all possible worlds, but it's still the only place where you can get a decent steak. Ads answered out of desperation in the New York Review of Books proved equally futile as, the Bay Area bisexual told me I didn't quite coincide with either of her desires. In the event of war, I'm a hostage. If I was to see any of my films now I would feel, oh God, you know it's awful, I could do that so much better now. Look at all the terrible things I did and all the mistakes and all the compromises and all the blunders I made, and it would be such a terrible experience for me to see them. So it's better that I put it out and move on to the next thing and make it history as quickly as possible. Doing abominations is against the law, particularly if the abominations are done while wearing a lobster bib. I can understand that an audience, buying a ticket to see a picture of mine, wants to see something funny because they feel confident that at least I have a fighting chance to make a funny film when I make a film. Whereas if I make a dramatic film there's one chance in 1,000 that it's really going to come out great. So I understand how they feel about that, and they're completely right. Just don't take any class where you have to read Beowulf. The last woman I was in was the Statue of Liberty. Some drink deeply from the river of knowledge. Others only gargle. I work all the time because it's a great distraction and it keeps me from sitting home and obsessing morbidly. As the author, you know how you want it to appear on screen, and it's always the content dictating the form. I don't own a computer. I've never seen anything online at all, nothing. I don't own a word processor. I have none of that stuff. It's not an act of rebellion. I'm just not a gadget person. The content dictates the style all the time. That's the way it is. If the content of the film is highly jagged, neurotic, fast-paced, it just called for that kind of shooting, editing and performance. The artist's job is not to succumb to despair but to find an antidote for the emptiness of existence. Your self-esteem is a notch below Kafka. I write about what I want to write about, and so the film comes out as a very personal expression even if its subject matter is totally prefabricated. My grandfather was a very insignificant man, actually. At his funeral his hearse followed the other cars. Writing is great because you never have to meet the test of reality when you're writing. When I write, the film is always a masterpiece at that point. I write and I make up things and budgets don't mean anything and it's great. This guy goes to a psychiatrist and says, "Doc, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken." The doctor says, "Well, why don't you turn him in?" And the guy says, "I would, but I need the eggs." Well, I guess that's pretty much how I feel about relationships. You know, they're totally irrational and crazy and absurd, but I guess we keep going through it because, most of us need the eggs. Remember, if you smoke after sex, you're doing it too fast. I am two with nature. You know what my philosophy of life is? That it's important to have some laughs, but you got to suffer a little too, because otherwise you miss the whole point to life. Many people who get a lot of money are willing to work with me for no money. This is true. You can't work at a relationship, you can't control it. You have to be lucky and go through your life. If you are not lucky, you have to be prepared for some degree of suffering. That's why most relationships are very difficult and have some degree of pain. People stay together because of inertia, they don't have the energy. Because they are frightened of being lonely, or they have children. The audience is making the film and not the filmmaker. It is impossible to travel faster than light, and certainly not desirable, as one's hat keeps blowing off. I wonder if Socrates and Plato took a house on Crete during the summer. Once munching has begun, Schopenhauer held, the human will cannot resist further munching, and the result is a universe with crumbs over everything. I've been lucky because my films have consistently made a profit, almost all of them have made a profit. Never a huge profit, but nobody gets hurt. And therefore I get a lot of freedom. Human beings are divided into mind and body. The mind embraces all the nobler aspirations, like poetry and philosophy, but the body has all the fun. You'll find as you go through life that great depth and smoldering sensuality don't always win. Events unfold so unpredictably, so unfairly, human happiness does not seem to be included in the design of creation. It is only we, with our capacity to love, that give meaning to the indifferent universe. And yet, most human beings seem to have the ability to keep trying and even try to find joy from simple things, like their family, their work, and from the hope that future generations might understand more. Once the movie's over, there's not much point. When the thing is edited, mixed, and color-corrected, and you've finished it. In my case, I never read anything about it, I never think about it. I'm not a drinker, my body won't tolerate, spirits, really. I had 2 martinis New Year's Eve and I tried to hijack an elevator and fly it to Cuba. It's a match made in heaven, by a retarded angel. Have you ever taken a serious political stand on anything? Yeah. Sure. For 24 hours once I refused to eat grapes. I don't like to reminisce much, and my walls don't have photographs of me and the actors I was with, or any of that stuff. I try and keep that disciplined, and just work. There are so many traps you can get into, and looking back on your own work is certainly one of them. I've never dated a fictional character before. The closest I ever came was an Italian. My films are therapy for my debilitating depression. In institutions people weave baskets. I make films. Human existence is a brutal experience to me. It's a brutal, meaningless experience, an agonizing, meaningless experience with some oases, delight, some charm and peace. But these are just small oases. Overall, it is a brutal, terrible experience, and so salvation, is what can you do to alleviate the agony of the human condition, the human predicament. That is what interests me the most. For some reason I've always had an irrational love for New York. There's no reason that you would necessarily like it on paper. It's very expensive. Sun is bad for you. Everything our parents said was good is bad. Sun, milk, red meat, college. The less I speak to the actors, the better. And I always hire great people, and I don't want to impose my preconceived notions on them. They know how to play it. When I was young, I wanted to be a dramatic writer, a writer of tragedy. Nothing would have pleased me more than if I could have written like Eugene O'Neill or Tennessee Williams. Hey listen, I've proved a lot of things. That's how I pay my rent. Theories and little observations. A puckish remark now and then. Occasional maxims. It beats picking olives, but let's not get carried away. I'm a terrible musician. While the band members are great, I'm tolerated and affectionately regarded because I do movies, but if I had to make my living as a musician I would starve. I'm like a Sunday tennis player. More than any other time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness. The other, to total extinction. Let us pray we have the wisdom to choose correctly. Life is unresolved, confusing, bewildering, puzzling, ambiguous. You don't really know what's going to happen. The future is uncertain for everybody. The process of making films is so technically demanding that it's a distraction. You don't spend your time thinking about the philosophical content, which is often very depressing. Marriage is the death of hope. Why not? Life is short, life is dull, life is full of pain, and this is a chance for something special. I do believe that reality is dreadful and that you are forced to choose it in the end or go crazy, but that it kills you. Of all the wonders of nature, a tree in summer is perhaps the most remarkable, with the possible exception of a moose singing "Embraceable You" in spats. It's easier to direct. If you direct something poorly and reshoot it the next day, stage it better, make it work better, you have a lot of possibilities. You can edit it in certain ways so that it works, but there's no getting around weaknesses of the script. Have you ever noticed that good people sleep better, but bad people seem to have more fun when they're awake? If you don't have fun doing the film, then the results of the film will never give you any fun. I never think I feel cynical in general. Cynical is reality with an alternate spelling. I feel there's a gigantic amount of injustice and overt crime every day in the world, from emotional crimes to international crimes, and it often carries rewards. Tradition is the illusion of permanence. Honey, there's a spider in your bathroom the size of a Buick. My parents stayed together for 40 years. But that was out of spite. Men learn to love the woman they are attracted to. Women learn to become attracted to the man they fall in love with. I've inherited the worst of each parent. I have my father's hypochondria and lack of concentration. I have his amorality. I have everything bad that he had. Then I have my mother's surly, pill-like, complaining, whining attitude. I'm a creature of the New York City streets. I've never felt truth was beauty. Never. I've always felt that people can't take too much reality. I like being in Ingmar Bergman's world. Or in Louis Armstrong's world. Or in the world of the New York Knicks. Because it's not this world. You spend your whole life searching for a way out. You just get an overdose of reality, you know, and it's a terrible thing. I'm always fighting against reality. There is always the possibility that people will change. Real change is more rare. You are who you are at a certain age in life. You are pretty much a variation of that your whole life. It's conceivable that you will change, but it's not likely. I can't imagine any director directing a screenplay of mine, because the great directors all have very personal styles, and the ones that don't are not very interesting directors. Last year I had difficulty with my income tax. I tried to take my analyst off as a business deduction. The government said it was entertainment. We compromised finally and made it a religious contribution. Death should not be seen as the end but as a very effective way to cut down expenses. Fantasy is seductive and much more wonderful than reality, but you can't take it to the bank. It's always an escape. And if used as an escape, as in attending a movie or a show for a circumscribed period of time, it's fine. When it starts to become undifferentiated from reality, it leads to big trouble. God is silent. Now if only man would shut up. Don't knock masturbation. It's sex with someone I love. Well, if I don't get at least 16 hours, I'm a basket case. Fantasy is only a state of mind that you can employ when existing in a real context. All my life is passing in front of my eyes. The worst part of it is I'm driving a used car. I don't know the question, but sex is definitely the answer. For the first year of marriage I had basically a bad attitude. I tended to place my wife underneath a pedestal. My films are misinterpreted all the time. I don't mind that. Everybody's films are misinterpreted. But there's no malice or stupidity in the people that misinterpret them. You know what you do, but someone else sees it, and they want to talk about it or write about it, and so they misinterpret them. Inertia accounts for 2/3 of marriages, but love accounts for the other third. Error, no keyboard. Press F1 to continue. I could turn on my radio in the morning when I was getting dressed for school and hear Frank Sinatra and Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman and think this is the music. Now that music is art. Ellington is art. At that time it was just what you heard on the radio. Cole Porter was just a guy who wrote pretty songs and Billie Holiday would sing them. People say that death is a part of life and there must be something to it, but I just see it as bad news and I want everybody to stop sugarcoating it. Arlene and I have to get a divorce. She thinks I'm a pervert because I drank our water bed. In a relationship, it is better to be the leaver than the leavee. We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives. If God exists, I hope he has a good excuse. Life is horrible, but it is not relentlessly black from wire to wire. You can sit down and hear a Mozart symphony, or you can watch the Marx Brothers, and this will give you a pleasant escape for a while. And that is about the best that you can do. I see no advantages in aging whatsoever. You become shriveled. You become decrepit. You lose your faculties. Your peer group passes away. You sit in a room gumming your porridge. I don't see any advantage in this whatsoever. Child molestation is a touchy subject. Read the papers. Half the country's doing it. Life's hard, then you die. I just can't listen to any more Wagner, you know, I'm starting to get the urge to conquer Poland. To me, movies are valuable as an art form and as a wonderful means of popular entertainment. But I think movies have gone terribly wrong. There have been times when I've thought about it, but with my luck it would probably turn out to be only a temporary solution. What is so fascinating about sitting around watching a bunch of pituitary cases stuff a ball through a hoop? The whole concept of awards is silly. I cannot abide by the judgment of other people, because if you accept it when they say you deserve an award, then you have to accept it when they say you don't. I keep getting more and more ambitious. Over the years, to some degree, in some areas, I feel I've grown. In some areas, I made a fool of myself. In some areas, I think I can still do some funny things. There is no question that there is an unseen world. The problem is, how far is it from Midtown and how late is it open? If you meet somebody and are attracted to someone, and the exquisite neurons in your brain and her brain intermesh properly, then things can be wonderful. It's not like homework. You don't have to work at the relationship. Throughout history in the theater and film people do like sarcastic characters, and they do like curmudgeons, if they're amusing. They do like them despite the fact that they're vitriolic, particularly if they're for the right thing. If you can see that the person is a decent person and is for the right thing, and is not just a nasty person with base motives, but someone who is a decent human but expresses himself. Those who can't do, teach. And those who can't teach, teach Jim. I want to tell you a terrific story about oral contraception. I asked this girl to sleep with me and she said no. I recently turned 60. Practically a third of my life is over. The artist can't give you an answer that's satisfying to the dreadful reality of your existence. So the best you can do is maybe entertain people and refresh them for an hour and a half. Malm then offers the greatest advice anyone could give to a young author. At the end of an interrogation sentence, place a question mark. You'd be surprised how effective it can be. End production today. Wrap party as usual a little sad. Slow danced with Scarlett. Broke her toe. Not my fault. When she dipped me back, I stepped on it. Penelope and Javier anxious to work with me again. Said if I ever come up with another screenplay to try and find them. Goodbye drink with Rebecca. Sentimental moment. Everyone in cast and crew chipped in and bought me a ballpoint pen. I can't enjoy anything unless everybody is. If one guy is starving someplace, that puts a crimp in my evening. Early in life, I was visited by the bluebird of anxiety. Paranoia is knowing all the facts. Over the years I've never written or made movies about political themes, cause while they do have current critical importance, in the large scheme of things, only the big questions matter and the answers to those big questions are very, very depressing. How can I believe in God when just last week I got my tongue caught in the roller of an electric typewriter? Whosoever loveth wisdom is righteous, but he that keepeth company with foul is weird. My father worked for the same firm for 12 years. They fired him and replaced him with a tiny gadget that does everything my father does, only much better. The depressing thing is my mother ran out and bought one. When I get up in the morning, I go and I work with beautiful women and charming men and funny comedians and dramatic artists. And I'm presented with costumes and great music to choose from and sets. I travel a certain amount of places, so I've been living in a bubble. And I like it. How wrong Emily Dickinson was. Hope is not the thing with feathers. The thing with feathers has turned out to be my nephew. I must take him to a specialist in Zurich. See, I will always have this penchant for what I call kamikaze women. I call them kamikazes because they crash their plane, they're self-destructive. But they crash into you, and you die along with them. You're so good-looking I can barely keep my eyes on the meter. This is my perspective and has always been my perspective on life. I have a very grim, pessimistic view of it. I always have, since I was a little boy. It hasn't gotten worse with age or anything. I do feel that it's a grim, painful, nightmarish, meaningless experience, and that the only way that you can be happy is if you tell yourself some lies and deceive yourself. I've been escaping my whole life. Since I was a little child, I escaped into the movies on the other side as an audience member. I escaped by going into the movies and sitting in the movies all day long. Standing in a garage no more makes you a car than standing in a church makes you a Christian. There's no way to prove that there is no God. You just have to take it on faith. If you're born with a gift, to behave like it's an achievement is not right. One of the wonderful things about making a film of any genre is that you have dialogue. You can take up a position. If you want to say something about your position, you can just say it. You don't have to spend massive amounts of screen time. Some people think about sex all the time, some people think of sex some of the time, and some people never think about sex, they become lawyers. Confidence is what you have before you understand the problem. The only thing that does change, to some degree, is that you have some life experiences, you suffer a certain amount and you incorporate that into your work. Not in the content of your work, but in the sensibility of your work. It's nothing that you try and do, it just happens. And if you're lucky, people buy tickets to see it, and if you're not lucky, then, they don't like it. But that's all. That, sex, was the most fun I ever had without laughing. The chief problem about death, incidentally, is the fear that there may be no afterlife, a depressing thought, particularly for those who bother to shave. Also, there is the fear that there is an afterlife but no one will know where it's being held. On the plus side, death is one of the few things that can be done as easily laying down. Until you've been kissed on a rainy Parisian afternoon, you've never been kissed. If I could only see one miracle, just one miracle. Like a burning bush, or the seas part, or my Uncle Sasha pick up a check. I think there is too much wrong with the world to ever get too relaxed and happy. The more natural state, and the better one, I think, is one of some anxiety and tension over man's plight in this mysterious universe. God, you Jews are truly exotic. Exotic? She should only know the Greenblatts. Or Mr. and Mrs. Milton Sharpstein, my father's friends. Or for that matter, my cousin Tova. Exotic? I mean, they're nice, but hardly exotic with their endless bickering over the best way to combat indigestion or how far back to sit from the television set. Every time you make a movie it's a new and different experience. You learn very little from the past. So, I'm a little bit better than I was when I first started. I asked the girl if she could bring a sister for me. She did. Sister Maria Teresa. It was a very slow evening. We discussed the New Testament. We agreed that he was very well adjusted for an only child. I should have known something was wrong with my first wife. When I brought her home to meet my parents, they approved of her. There's no rhyme or reason to anything that I do. It's whatever seems right at the time. I'm 12 years old. I run into a synagogue. I ask the rabbi the meaning of life. He tells me the meaning of life, but he tells it to me in Hebrew. I don't understand Hebrew. Then he wants to charge me $600 for Hebrew lessons. In every generation there are a few people who are authentically funny. The cosmetics change. You may not be able to articulate it, and you may laugh at them and get a certain amount of enjoyment. But when you're asleep at night, and you wake up at 3 in the morning, and you're alone in your bed, you know who's really funny. Some men are heterosexual and some men are bisexual and some men don't think about sex at all, you know, they become lawyers. If man were immortal, do you realize what his meat bills would be? Sex and death are two things that come but once in my lifetime, but at least after death you're not nauseous. I'm not a big believer in the sense of Jews having a monopoly on comedy. And in all of Babylonia there was wailing and gnashing of teeth, till the prophets bade the multitudes get a grip on themselves and shape up. The prettiest women are almost always the most boring, and that is why some people feel there is no God. You can't ride two horses with one behind. You are always a comedian by default. You are this way because you've been forced to be this way, but it is better to be the hero. So if you can be a persona, the great one of my lifetime of course was and is Marlon Brando. This stuff tastes awful, I could have made a fortune selling it in my health food store. Should I marry W? Not if she won't tell me the other letters in her name. Therefore, to be unhappy one must love, or love to suffer, or suffer from too much happiness. I hope you're getting this down. I have a number of symptoms that are neurotic and are constricting in the sense that if I had a brilliant idea for a film that had to be shot in Tulsa, okay, I would tear it up and throw it away. Anything outside of New York, 'cause I can't exist in a hotel outside of my own home, I have to be in my own home and my own environment. This is a neurotic symptom that is constricting to my work even. By now they had mastered my own language, but they still made simple mistakes, like using hermeneutics when they meant heuristic. I'm giving my analyst one more year then I'm going to Lourdes. Pale, nervous girls with black-rimmed glasses and blunt-cut hair lolled around on sofas, riffling Penguin classics provocatively. But it wasn't just intellectual experiences. They were peddling emotional ones, too. For $50, I learned, you could relate without getting close. For $100, a girl would lend you her Bartok records, have dinner, and then let you watch while she had an anxiety attack. To me nature is spiders and bugs, and big fish eating little fish, and plants eating plants, and animals eating. It's like an enormous restaurant, that's the way I see it. My Grammy never gave gifts, you know. She was too busy getting raped by Cossacks. I've gained no wisdom, no insight, no mellowing. I would make all the same mistakes again, today. It's important to control yourself because life gets too complicated if you don't, but the impulse is often there for people. Some say society should be more open. That doesn't work either. The best things in life are censored. Another good thing about being poor is that when you are 70 your children will not have you declared legally insane in order to gain control of your estate. There is no advantage getting older. You don't get smarter, you don't get wiser, you don't get more mellow, you don't get more kindly, nothing good happens. Your back hurts more, you get more indigestion, your eyesight isn't as good, you need a hearing aid. It's a bad business getting old and I would advise you not to do it if you can avoid it. It doesn't have a romantic quality. I never knew what Amazon was. I've never seen any of those series, even on cable. I've never seen The Sopranos, or Mad Men. I'm out every night and when I come home, I watch the end of the baseball or basketball game, and there's Charlie Rose and I go to sleep. How the hell do I know why there were Nazis? I don't know how the can opener works. When I was born my mother was terribly disappointed. Not that she wanted a girl, she wanted a divorce. We live in far too permissive a society. Never before has pornography been this rampant. And those films are so badly lit. I had a mad impulse to throw you down on the lunar surface and commit interstellar perversion with you. I think Hollywood has gone in a disastrous path. It's terrible. The years of cinema that were great were the 30s, 40s, not so much the 50s, but then the foreign films took over and it was a great age of cinema as American directors were influenced by them and that fueled the 50s and 60s and 70s. I believe in sex and death, two experiences that come once in a lifetime. In life, one is entitled to a side dish of either coleslaw or potato salad, and the choice must be made in terror, with the knowledge that not only is our time on earth limited but most kitchens close at 10. Every hooker I ever speak to tells me that it beats the hell out of waitressing. People make films for different reasons. For money. Or, they make them because something in them demands artistic expression. I do it because I enjoy the work. In short, the best thing to do is behave in a manner befitting one's age. If you are 16 or under, try not to go bald. Honey, bring down a copy of my will, and an eraser. There are two important things in the world, the first is sex. The other isn't all that important. I never start editing a film until it's completely shot. I don't edit along the way, ever. When it's finished I come in here and we start with reel 1, scene 1, and start editing shot by shot by shot until we're finished. We stand at a crossroads. One path leads to despair, the other to destruction. Let's hope we make the right choice. Eternity is really long, especially near the end. While we're waiting for a cab, I'll give you your lesson for today. Don't listen to what your teachers tell you, you know. Don't pay attention. Just see what they look like, and that's how you'll know what life is really gonna be like. The Jewish culture. People that are Jewish have a certain cultural habit that they've formed, and one of those habits is an appreciation of theater and music. These are cultural things one does associate with values that are promulgated by Jewish families. I think that's a good thing. The universe is merely a fleeting idea in God's mind, a pretty uncomfortable thought, particularly if you've just made a down payment on a house. Sygmnd was a poor Austrian who'd lost all the vowels in his name in a boating accident. I'm trying to arrange my life so I don't have to be present. Regarding love, what can you say? It's not the quantity of your sexual relations that counts. It's the quality. On the other hand, if the quantity drops below once every 8 months, I would definitely look into it. My wife and I thought we were in love, but it turned out to be benign. I got a divorce because my ex-wife left me for another woman. I was raised in a religious home. It was unreasonable enforced religion that turned me off it. It was a joyless, unpleasant, stupid, barbaric thing when I was a child, and I've never gotten over that feeling. If you're talking about religion, it's one thing. I don't hold Jewish religion with any more seriousness than I would any other. We knew the front door was always left open, but we broke in just to keep in practice. Doxy turned all the Washburn family photos to the wall so there wouldn't be any witnesses. I think it's my job, or the artist's job, to try and find some solution or some reason to accept things. But given the grimmest reality, I feel the grimmest facts are the real facts, the true facts, that you're born, you die, you suffer, it's to no purpose. And you're gone forever, ever, ever, and that's it. He's a politician. That's a notch below child molester. What advice would I give the average homeowner to protect himself against burglars? Well, the first thing is to keep a light on in the house when you go out. It must be at least a 60-watt bulb. Anything less and the burglar will ransack the house, out of contempt for the wattage. I enjoy the making of the film, and it's something for me to do. If nobody ever comes to my films, if people don't want to give me money to make films, that will stop me. But as long as people come all over the world and I have an audience and I have ideas for films, I will do them for as long as I enjoy the process. And I like the whole process of making a film. Don't worry, I know almost exactly what I'm doing. I was in analysis. I was suicidal. As a matter of fact, I would have killed myself, but I was in analysis with a strict Freudian, and if you kill yourself they make you pay for the sessions you miss. I took a puff of the wrong cigarette at a fraternity dance once, and the cops had to get me, you know. I broke 2 teeth trying to give a hickey to the Statue of Liberty. I don't think my film style has changed. I'm doing the same kind of jokes I did when I was younger. With me, it's just a genetic dissatisfaction with everything. I did not marry the first girl that I fell in love with, because there was a tremendous religious conflict, at the time. She was an atheist, and I was an agnostic. No matter what you do, there will be critics. No one ever wants the whole script. I give the whole script to people who require the whole script, but to those people who don't require the whole script I don't give it to them, and no one cares. They're relieved not to have to read extra pages that they're not in. In formulating any philosophy, the first consideration must always be, what can we know? That is, what can we be sure we know, or sure that we know we knew it, if indeed it is at all knowable? Or have we simply forgotten it and are too embarrassed to say anything? Descartes hinted at the problem when he wrote, "My mind can never know my body, although it has become quite friendly with my legs." I came home one night, some month ago, and I went to the closet in my bedroom, and a moth ate my sports jacket. He was laying on the floor, nauseous, you know. Dear Mom and Dad, leave $50,000 in a bag under the bridge on Decatur Street. If there is no bridge on Decatur Street, please build one. During the course of the year, a number of ideas just come up automatically. I could be walking down the street, or shaving. An idea will hit me and I'll write it down. Then, when I'm ready to write, I check my little matchbooks and napkins and find that it is good or it's pretty terrible. There are other times when I don't have any ideas and I'll go into a room and close the door and I sit and sweat it out for a day or a month, and eventually I come up with something. Is world peace possible, or is the human race too innately aggressive? For instance, have you ever seen women at a sample sale? A deranged person is supposed to have the strength of 10 men. I have the strength of one small boy, with polio. I'm not antisocial. I'm just not social. A stockbroker is someone who invests other people's money until it is all gone. Men would make love with any number of women, even total strangers, while females were selective. They were catering to the demands of one small egg. While males had millions of frantic sperm screaming, "Let us out, let us out." You can be distracted by your love life, by the baseball game, movies, by the nonsense. Can I get my kid into this private school? Can I get this girl to go out with me Saturday night? Am I going to get the promotion in my office? All this stuff. But in the end the universe burns out. So I think it's completely meaningless. There is something about big cities that turns me on, and for whatever mysterious reason, places like New York and Paris inspire me. I think it's because cities represent civilization, and as crime-ridden and broken down as some of them are, it's still better than skipping through a meadow. If you pursue the other woman, it's a losing situation and it's not good for your relationship or your marriage. If your marriage is open and you're allowed to, that's no good either. There's no way, really in the end, to be happy unless you get very lucky. Honey, you're the one who stopped sleeping with me, okay? It'll be a year come April 20th. I remember the date exactly, because it was Hitler's birthday. Never shoot up in the air when you're standing under it. It is clear the future holds great opportunities. It also holds pitfalls. The trick will be to avoid the pitfalls, seize the opportunities, and get back home by 6 o'clock. I loathed every day and regret every moment I spent in a school. I've always been lucky in casting. The trick in casting is to hire great people, and let them do what they do, don't interfere with them too much. And then when they're great, take credit for it in the end. What if nothing exists and we're all in somebody's dream? Or what's worse, what if only that fat guy in the third row exists? You're still in love? No, I'm not. I'm not. She'll always be a part of me, and she's an important person in my life, but for the two of us something wasn't working. What element? We never found out. Skeptic that I was as an adolescent, I had recently come to believe in a supreme being after thumbing through a Victoria's Secret catalog. I consider myself a completely lucky filmmaker. I've had nothing but good luck. Everything I've needed has come my way. When it comes to sex, there are certain things that should always be left unknown, and with my luck, they probably will be. I wouldn't mind dying so much if it wasn't that I would be dead at the end of it. I don't rely on anybody except my own judgment. I don't get much input. I don't know if that's helped me or if I would be better off if I did rely on someone. Umlaut snaps around and we cut to a blonde apparition in her early 20s, clearly descended from Olympus by way of Hugh Hefner's mansion. I had an IQ test. The results came back negative. Why ruin a good story with the truth? You can't anticipate in the room the riches of what you encounter when you're location hunting for a movie. When a doctor makes a mistake, it's best to bury the subject. Dying is like making love, except you don't get nauseous afterwards. Abysmal vermin that I am, I couldn't of course tell her that it was her incredible mother that I wanted to see again. I knew only as I drove through the cold, night autumn air that somewhere Freud, Sophocles and Eugene O'Neill were laughing. The only love that lasts is unrequited love. I am plagued by doubts. Nothing like a little post-traumatic stress disorder to make your day complete. I don't want to move to a city where the only cultural advantage is being able to make a right turn on a red light. You look up after many years and you find that a film has become a classic because it's meaningful to people and alive, decade after decade. Sex between a man and a woman can be absolutely wonderful, provided you get between the right man and the right woman. The important thing, I think, is not to be bitter. You know, if it turns out that there is a God, I don't think that he's evil. I think that the worst thing you could say about him is that basically he's an underachiever. After all, you know, there are worse things in life than death. Having sex is like playing bridge. If you don't have a good partner, you'd better have a good hand. I foresee death by culture shock. When you make the film, it's like a chef who works on the meal. After you're working all day in the kitchen and dicing and cutting and putting the sauces on, you don't want to eat it. That's how I always feel about the films. I work on it for a year. I've written it, I've worked with the actors, I've edited, put the music in. I just never want to see it again. All people know the same truth. Our lives consist of how we choose to distort it. I don't fear death. I just don't want to be around when it happens. I've become the person I've always hated, but I'm happier. Retirement is a very subjective thing. There are guys I know who retire and they're very happy and they never miss work at all. I can't see myself retiring and fondling a dog every day. I like to get up and work and go out. I have too much energy or too much nervous anxiety or something. So I don't see myself retiring. Maybe I will suddenly get a stroke or a heart attack and I will be forced to retire, but if my health holds out I don't expect to retire. The great question of philosophy remains, if life is meaningless, what can be done about alphabet soup? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Is there possibility of a group discount? Oh, he was probably a member of the National Rifle Association. It was a group that helped criminals get guns so they could shoot citizens. It was a public service. I like broad comedy. If I had an idea tomorrow for a film that was all slapstick and broad comedy, and it was an idea that interested me, I would not hesitate to do it because I enjoy watching these kinds of film. I don't know what I'm doing, but my incompetence has never stopped my enthusiasm. My analyst warned me, but you were so beautiful I got another analyst. I have great faith in the actors. When they improvise, it always sounds better than the stuff I write in my bedroom. When they improvise, they make it sound alive. Nietzsche says that we will live the same life, over and over again. God, I'll have to sit through the Ice Capita again. Man cannot live by bread alone. Every once in a while he needs a salad. I'm awash in self-contempt. What's the matter with me? Why can't I be cool? What has gotten into you lately? Save a little craziness for menopause. I'm afraid of the dark and suspicious of the light. I can't do anything to death, doctor's orders. There are drawbacks in being famous too, but you can live with those. They're not life-threatening. If the paparazzi are outside your restaurant or your house, and actors make such a big thing of it and scurry into cars and drape things, you think they're going to be crucified or something. It's not a big deal. You can get used to that. It's not so terrible. Marriage is like mushrooms. We notice too late if they are good or bad. Problems are like toilet paper. You pull on one and 10 more come. If God is everywhere, I had concluded, then He is in food. Therefore, the more I ate the godlier I would become. Impelled by this new religious fervor, I glutted myself like a fanatic. Life is a tragedy filled with suffering and despair, and yet some people do manage to avoid jury duty. As I've gotten older, the parts have diminished. I liked it when I was younger. I could always play the lead in the movie and I could do all the romantic scenes with the women, and it was fun and I liked to play that. Now, I'm older and I'm reduced to playing the backstage doorman or the uncle or something. I don't really love that, so occasionally, when a part comes up, I'll play it. What a world! It could be so wonderful if it wasn't for certain people. My relationship with death remains the same. I'm strongly against it. My grandfather had a wonderful funeral. On the buffet table there was a replica of the deceased in potato salad. I've had a very productive life. I've worked very hard. I've never fallen prey to depression. I'm not sure I could have done all of that without being in psychoanalysis. The last time I was inside a woman was when I went to the Statue of Liberty. The universe is haphazard, morally neutral, and unimaginably violent. Change is almost always negative. Things degenerate. Is it better to be the lover or the loved one? Neither, if your cholesterol is over 600. By love, of course, I refer to romantic love, the love between man and woman, rather than between mother and child, or a boy and his dog, or two headwaiters. I've always been interested in being in other people's movies. I never get any offers. There will be no major solution to the suffering of humanity until we reach some understanding of who we are, what the purpose of creation was, what happens after death. Until those questions are resolved, we are caught. Sex alleviates tension. Love causes it. I once stole a pornographic book that was printed in Braille. I used to rub the dirty parts. I've always had an easy time directing actors because I always hire ones that are great before I get my hands on them. You know, it's one thing about intellectuals, they prove that you can be absolutely brilliant and have no idea what's going on. There are 3 rings involved with marriage: the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and the suffering. When you are dead, it is hard to find the light switch. I usually want to crawl into the ground after I make a film, almost invariably. If you take a frown and turn it upside down, the person you are holding by the ankles will soon pass out. If the world is a progressively realized community of interpretation, then either quadruplicity will drink procrastination or, provided that the nothing negates, boredom will ensue seldom more often than frequently. As a boy, I was ashamed to wear glasses. I memorized the eye chart, and then on the test they asked essay questions. I carry a bullet in my breast pocket. Once, a crazy evangelist threw a Bible at me, which would have gone through my heart if it wasn't for the bullet. In fact, when they wake up in the morning, they're Jack Nicholson or Robert De Niro or Josh Brolin. And it's built in, but they think it's all this other stuff. But it's not. They'd be great if they didn't think about their part or if they did think about it. Can you believe that? She says I'm not leader enough for her. Who was she looking for? Hitler? I love nature, I just don't want to get any of it on me. Sometimes some of the best moments are contributed by the actors being creative, with their own improvisations. How does gravity work? And if it were to cease suddenly, would certain restaurants still require a jacket? God is either cruel or incompetent. When I first started, there were writers that I looked up to that I felt very influenced by and very respectful toward their work and their opinion of my work. Figures tell us there are already more people on Earth than we need to move even the heaviest piano. The good sleep better, but the bad seem to enjoy the waking hours much more. You can learn technological things, you can learn about specific things, but the real problems that people deal with in any subject, existential subjects or romantic subjects, you never learn anything. So you make a fool of yourself when you're 20, you make a fool of yourself at 40, at 60, at 80. The ancient Greeks were dealing with these problems. They screwed up all the time. People do now. American films, it's a money-making industry. And in France, you can find great respect for cinema as art. I was thrown out of college for cheating on the metaphysics exam. I looked into the soul of the boy sitting next to me. When I asked my mother where babies came from, she thought I said rabies. She said you get them from being bitten by a dog. The next week, a woman on my block gave birth to triplets. I thought she'd been bitten by a Great Dane. In my next life I want to live backwards. Start out dead and finish off as an orgasm. When I was a young man, my friends and I and all of us in New York were very influenced by French cinema. French cinema played an enormous influence on those of us who wanted to be filmmakers. My ex-wife was a philosophy major at NYU. Yeah, she and I used to have deep philosophical discussions where she would prove that I didn't exist. I should go to Paris and jump off of the Eiffel Tower. If I took the Concorde, I could be dead 3 hours earlier. I see the glass half full, but of poison. I hope you're getting this down. I want to return to the womb, anyone's. I have one last request. Don't use embalming fluid on me. I want to be stuffed with crab meat. I idolized Superman when I was younger. I thought he and I had a lot in common. He was always going into phone booths and taking off all his clothes. Paris is particularly beautiful in the rain. It was just a nice experience for me, a pleasant experience, and I was able to present it to the world through my eyes, very subjectively, not realistically, but subjectively. Life is hard for insects. And don't think mice are having any fun either. Life is a concentration camp. You're stuck here and there's no way out and you can only rage impotently against your persecutors. I was the captain of the latent paranoid softball team. We used to play all the neurotics on Sunday morning. Nail-biters against the bedwetters, and if you've never seen neurotics play softball, it's really funny. I used to steal second base, and feel guilty and go back. I didn't go to Paris until I was a grown-up in 1965. And when I went to Paris, it was the Paris I knew only from American movies. I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want. Is knowledge knowable? If not, how do we know? The wicked at heart probably know something. Paris is a very exciting city. I learned about Paris the same way that Americans do, from the movies. I was in analysis for years because of a traumatic childhood. I was breastfed through falsies. He's a genius, she's a genius, wow, you know a lot of geniuses, you should meet some stupid people sometime, you might learn something. You mellow too much, you ripen and rot. When you work from city to city or country to country, you work the same way, the working method is the same. The difference between sex and death is, death you can do alone and nobody laughs at you. No, I don't think you're paranoid. I think you're the opposite of paranoid. I think you walk around with the insane delusion that people like you. There's nothing wrong with you that a little Prozac and a polo mallet can't cure. Everyone wants to get out of living where they're living now, because life is a pretty tough proposition and not much fun. But when you think back to earlier times, you only extrapolate the nice things. Geez, I should stop ruining my life searching for answers I'm never gonna get, and just enjoy it while it lasts. I sold my memoirs of my love life to Parker Brothers, and they are going to make a game out of it. Taste my tuna casserole, tell me if I put in too much hot fudge. How am I immature? Intellectually, emotionally, and sexually. Yeah, but in what other ways? Even if God exists, He's done such a terrible job, it's a wonder people don't get together and file a class action suit against Him. Show business is dog eat dog. It's worse than dog eat dog. Its dog doesn't return dog's phone calls. A man that has never lied to a woman has no respect for her feelings. Everything is controlled by a small evil group to which, unfortunately, no one we know belongs. There is an advantage in having a routine and working with the same people when you can, and in writing as a regular thing and filming as a regular thing. That routine pays off for you. You get a lot of productivity that way, rather than sitting around waiting for inspiration and waiting for the perfect thing to happen. I would be much less productive that way. I think universal harmony is a pipe dream, and it may be more productive to focus on more modest goals, like a ban on yodeling. The prison psychiatrist asked me if I thought sex was dirty. I told him only when it's done right. Everybody knows how awful the world is, and each person distorts it in a certain way that enables him to get through. Some people distort it with religious things, others with sports, money, love, art, and they all have their own nonsense about what makes it meaningful, and all but nothing makes it meaningful. These things definitely serve a certain function, but in the end they all fail to give life meaning, and everyone goes to his grave in a meaningless way. If the actors are working, and I have a dinner engagement, I don't do 20 takes. I do 5 takes and go home. I want to go to dinner. See, I never gain an ounce, because, you know, my anxiety acts like aerobics. I'm at the stage of life when if a girl says no to me, I'm profoundly grateful to her. I'm in show business. I'm not like a poor factory worker who'd been laid off. It's very hard to keep your spirits up. You've got to keep selling yourself a bill of goods, and some people are better at lying to themselves than others. If you face reality too much, it kills you. You've got to find an answer to the question, why go on? What do I dislike about death? Must be the hours. I'd like to make a great movie. I've made many movies. I think I've made some good movies. I've never felt I've made a great movie. I'm really a timid person. I was beaten up by Quakers. My education was dismal. I went to a series of schools for mentally disturbed teachers. Chastity is curable, if detected early. I wish my parents had raised me in Manhattan because I think it's the greatest thing you can do for a kid is to raise them in New York City. I can see this with my own children. I'm a nice person. I have healthy life drives and goals. I don't drink, I don't smoke. I would never force myself sexually on a blind person. I was a nervous child. I was a bedwetter. I used to sleep with an electric blanket and I was constantly electrocuting myself. Standard mathematics has recently been rendered obsolete by the discovery that for years we have been writing the numeral 5 backward. This has led to re-evaluation of counting as a method of getting from 1 to 10. Students are taught advanced concepts of Boolean algebra, and formerly unsolvable equations are dealt with by threats of reprisals. To love is to suffer. To avoid suffering one must not love. But then one suffers from not loving. Therefore, to love is to suffer. Not to love is to suffer. No matter what the shrinks, or the pundits, or the self-help books tell you, when it comes to love, it's luck. The curtain rises on a vast primitive wasteland, not unlike certain parts of New Jersey. Where I grew up in Brooklyn, nobody committed suicide. Everyone was too unhappy. In real life I'm not the character I play in my films. I'm reasonably competent, I work very hard, I'm disciplined, I lead a very middle-class life. I work in the mornings, I have lunch, I practice my clarinet, I go to the movies, I eat out in restaurants or watch ball games on television or at the ball games. If my soul exists without my body, I am convinced all my clothes will be loose-fitting. I heard that commentary and dissent had merged and formed dictionary. I didn't believe in reincarnation in my past life, and I still don't. I'm generally not a social dramatist or comedy writer. My interests have always been more in psychological stories or personal relations and comic ideas. I know what I think, but I don't know how to put it into words. Maybe I could get a little bit drunk and dance it for you. I have an intense desire to return to the womb. Anybody's. Since I was a kid, I could make up stories, I could make up funny jokes, and I could always do it. When I'm walking down the street or having dinner, ideas will hit me, and I write them down on matchbooks or napkins and throw them in the drawer. I wish I could think of a positive point to leave you with. Will you take 2 negative points? Existence for eternity could get a little boring, especially towards the end. Bisexuality doubles your chances of a date on a Saturday night. I believe that sex is a beautiful thing between 2 people. Between 5, it's fantastic. If there is reincarnation, I'd like to come back as Warren Beatty's fingertips. I'm such a good lover because I practice a lot on my own. My love life is terrible. The last time I was inside a woman was when I visited the Statue of Liberty. Sex without love is an empty experience, but as empty experiences go, it's a pretty good one. People ask me whether I think that one day I might wake up one morning and run dry, but I've had the opposite feeling, that I would die before I had time to write all the ideas in my drawer. I keep wondering if there is an afterlife, and if there is, will they be able to break a 20? Let's say there was no terrorism whatsoever and we were all very nice to one another and we were all kind. We still would be faced with an extremely cruel and hostile universe and existence, and so I'm a great pessimist and I feel that it's impossible really to be happy, and that the best you can hope for is to be distracted. 80% of success is showing up. I can live in Paris for 4 months or London or, Barcelona. These are places that are like New York. But I don't think I could live in many places. When I had to make a film in the United States, I picked San Francisco because to me it's one of the great cities of America. But it was I, yes I, who discovered the link between excessive masturbation and entry into politics. Heaven knows, we all make mistakes. That's life, and chess. Please forgive me. My pedicurist had a stroke. She fell forward onto the orange stick and plunged it into my toe. It required bandaging.